Hello, everybody. It is March 19th, 2024, and it is day 5 of the This Is How You Change Your Life challenge. So, we're getting up onto the kind of last day of preliminary work. So, the first 5 days were really about figuring out my why, right? The first 7 days are about figuring out my why, but the first 5 days are really about establishing it with the core values, right? And so today, what I did, by the way, if you guys want to know, this is how you establish your core values. And if you're wondering what that looks like, go check out the other videos that I've made before this. So you can talk about why we need to have joy, why we need to have faith, why we need to have a level of freedom and sovereignty, why we need love, and now today, why we need boundaries and standards, which is about your values and how we find that, right? Now, why boundaries? Why are standards so important? Now, the reason I like the idea of standards more than boundaries is because boundaries, I think of it as like a wall, kind of like a cage. And in a way, I think we always think of we have boundaries, but boundaries are really created as a result of division, right? And I think that's what the word boundaries denotes. Well, really what I want to say is standards is because standards are this idea of a guideline for how we want to live our life, kind of like a framework upon which we place our life into. In a way, you can think of it as like drawing out the picture of your life with lines, and then you live the rest of your life coloring in those lines, right? Now, of course, it's okay to color outside the lines every once in a while, but the reason you have those lines is so that we can know what it is we want to look like. But when you think of boundaries, there's something that's very reactive about that word. And I don't like the idea. I think that one of the first things we learn, especially if we've mastered the last concept, which was, out of the 7 steps we have, number 4 was about love. And we have to recognize that love is about unconditional positive attention and service to those around us. So if we love everything unconditionally around us, what's up, kiddo? He's running hard. So if we love everything around us unconditionally, the idea is that we're creating these standards so that we can channel that love into a productive means of creation, not as a means of and it protects ourselves as a byproduct. But once again, I think if protection or this sense of fear is our primary way of thinking, that actually takes us back a step, right? And this is why we create standards, so we know how we're going to engage with the world, as well as the gift we're going to give, right? Which leads us into our next step, which is step 6 about creative expression. But that's tomorrow. So today, let's just talk about values. What does value mean? So I've explained all that. Now, values, our standards, are really just about how we want to live and see our life. It's a vision for the future, right? It's the vision, right? Because when you have that level of love, you think, man, I just want to share this and give it to with everyone. But everyone's idea of love is going to be a little different. Now, I do think the core principle of unconditional positive attention is fairly consistent throughout, but how that is received is different in the world because everyone's at different stages. Especially if you come this far in it, you've really grown to a point and level far beyond most people, right? Most people aren't at this place where they can love unconditionally. And so the reason we have values is so that we can structure the first part of our vision with a sense of stability, and so that we always have this differentiation. I have a really interesting story to prove this point. There was one time I was working at UPS. It was a long time ago. And I remember I'd really tried to work and understand how to love people more fully. And so I remember there's this one guy, he was definitely like on the spectrum or something, or definitely something going on, because he was very abrasive, pretty socially awkward, didn't talk much, kind of overweight, not a I don't think on the physical level very appealing chap, right? And I remember talking with him, he'd always be like really mean to me and just yell at me. And I didn't necessarily have anything against him, but I was indifferent to him, very indifferent to him. Then I started working more on trying to become more loving. I started reading a lot more like the Bible. I started reading like different scriptures and studying a lot more just about like Buddhism and stuff like that. And I'll never forget, one day while I was sitting on the slide where the boxes come down, I was looking at him and I just felt this intense feeling of love for him. That's the only way I could describe it. And I remember wishing that I was a better artist because I wanted to draw his face and make like a painting out of it and put it in a gallery. It was the strangest feeling I've ever felt, but I'll never forget it. It was a very distinctive moment I had. I remember looking at the stubble and the sweat dripping down his brow and his little like trucker hat and his handlebar mustache and his jowls and everything. And I remember just feeling like he was the most beautiful person ever and wanting to make a picture out of him. Now, obviously, like, I'm not into dudes, and especially if as dudes go, I don't necessarily think, whatever. But I'll never forget that feeling. It was a really intense feeling. And I remember just wanting to draw that guy. I was about 21 at the time, so that was over 13 years ago now. And so going through that experience, I saw that, okay, like, I'd want to be able to do that. Now, obviously, my ability to be able to draw that expression was limited, right? We're going to talk about how then we go about building our expression. But then I thought, well, even if I wanted to do this, if I went over and I told him like I loved him, and I went over and tried to connect with him, and he just wasn't having it. And I realized my having love for him didn't mean he was open to accepting it. And I realized as I became more and more loving towards everybody, I started talking to everyone, I started trying to do everything with everybody, and I started finding myself being ran ragged. And I thought to myself, well, if I love everybody, how do I know who to spend time with and who not to? Because what happens then is you get to this weird place where love is no longer the decision factor. Because you love everyone and you love everything. You want to draw, you want to play, you want to watch movies, you want to bicycle, you want to work out, you want to do everything. And you want to love everyone. And then suddenly you're torn and pulled in all these different places. So you're like, man, I have all this love. I feel like a sun. What am I going to do? I'm just going to explode. And that's why you have boundaries and standards, so that you can create a lens of stability. This is why the vision for your life at this point becomes so important. Because after you've come to this place and this step, you've realized, okay, I have this uncontrollable, powerful feeling in me because you've done the work, you've mastered the mind, you've mastered the body, you've mastered your spirit, and you've mastered your emotions. So your sense of being is one of wholeness. And when you have that, in order to live in this world, now you need a vision for your life. You need to examine the records in the book of life if you're very spiritual and you believe in like the Akashic records, stuff like that. If you're religious, following those religious tenets, or if you're just on your own and you don't have that, deciding what are my core values, right? Now, for me, I recently wrote down 8 commandments that I follow for myself. I have 5 values that I would say are very core, which is I put God first. After that, people over purpose. After that, I value education and the pursuit of truth. After that, I believe in unconditional service towards all beings. And then the 5th and foremost, well, it's the 5th one, but it's the one that I say is the foundation, is joy. Pursue and live life with joy and wonder and peace, right? So those are like my core values. Now, in order to live those core values out, I have 8 commandments or sort of rules that I follow for myself. Now, I'm not going to tell anybody my personal rules if you don't know me, right? But I have 8 of them, right? And if you guys want, we'll figure out a way to share that with you guys later. But really, it's the idea of being able to write down your values, be very clear about what those are, and then have sort of commandments or personal rules for yourself. And remember, these are not rules that came from outside of yourself. These are rules that come from within you. Because when they come from within you, there's a power to them. That's one of the reasons I don't share my personal rules too often, right? Because if you share them with people who don't understand that, everybody's going to try and interpret your rules. Not everyone, but very oftentimes people are going to try and tell you how to interpret and live your life before they'll do that for themselves. It's a very common thing in human behavior. So I implore you, if you get to this place where you're examining, why do I have boundaries? It's because you need to understand what your rules are. And that's what the boundaries are for. Because then, not only do you know how to direct your life energy, but you also know what is okay and not okay. So for me, one of the things I've decided is that even though I love everybody, if someone isn't fundamentally seeking truth, isn't fundamentally trying to seek and understand God, I know that I don't invest time and energy into them. It's not because I don't love them, but it's because I see that they're not in line with my mission and my values, right? So do you see how by creating and understanding what your values are, you're able to discern who you invest time, where you invest your time? So another value is full freedom of expression and truth. So I invest a lot of my time in art and my relationships. So people over purpose, right? So relationships are the next thing. Literally, it's God, and then the relationships I have with people. And I also include animals as people, right? So basically all living beings, those are my first two most important things. How I deal with God and how I deal with people and purpose. Then after those people and purpose, then I dictate my search for truth, which is my own self-expression, right? And so a lot of times people will be like, oh, Onyie, like, I don't know, like sometimes you seem like I don't know, a lot of people have different problems and issues with me. They think like maybe I'm not as considerate or whatever. But sometimes I ask, are those considerations in line with the well-being of all people involved, including myself? I include myself in that equation. So oftentimes, if I seem inconsiderate of societal standards, it's because in my own way, I haven't determined it as being founded in God and ultimately being founded in the well-being of everybody involved, including myself, right? So that's kind of how I move with my own boundaries and my why towards them. So as I'm doing that, we're going into this 35-day challenge. I got 30 more days now, basically to get myself in a place where I can leave. Because right now I feel like I'm a little trapped, stuck here in Utah. But my goal is leave and put myself in a place to accomplish my goals. And I have a very specific goal that I have by the beginning of May where I want to be. So the idea is working towards that. And I'm going to show you guys that process of how I do it, how I build my business out of nothing. So keep watching it. Check it out on the Prolific channel where we'll see those processes begin to take place. Right now I'm deciding what is the point of focus that needs to be point of mind as I work through all of that. So that's where my focus and energy is going right now. But then after that, it's setting out that step ladder of what is the activities that are in line with my values and what I'm trying to do now. And then just moving forward with that. And that is how we move. And that is where I'm at. Anyway, back here at the home. So stay happy, stay healthy, guys. Peace.